Hello and welcome to another episode of Conversations about Priesthood. Today's conversation will be with Rachel, who is the priest in charge of Pennington, and really looking forward to today's conversation. Hello, Rachel.
Hello, Vanessa. Lovely to speak to you.
Yes, lovely to meet you for the first time as well. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I wonder whether you'd be happy to share a bit more about yourself and maybe share a bit about the context that you're in as well.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm currently priest in charge in Pennington, which is in the Diocese of Winchester, and Pennington's right on the south coast. So I'm in the New Forest, so a holiday place right by the seaside. But the context here is interesting. On one side, we've got Lymington, which has got the yacht clubs and the quays, and the other side, we've got Milford with the beach huts and ice cream shops, and we've got the marshes. So that might tell you quite a lot about this place. Yeah. It's a little bit on the edge, even in the forest, with a mix of significant amounts of social housing and some. We're sadly got the reputation of being the number 2 for child poverty in the county. So there's some real deep pockets of need and challenge here. So yeah, that's the context in which I'm ministering here.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. One of the first questions that I always start off with, and it's a big question, and the question is, what is your understanding of the priesthood?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a really good question, and probably one I find quite hard to articulate, but I will try. I mean, my sense is obviously what we read in the scriptures is of sort of people set apart by God for particular ministries. But in today's world, that seems to play out really differently in different places. And for me, my discernment journey was really quite a long journey. I first felt some sort of calling when I was at school. And in my when I was at university, which for me was in the 1990s, I inquired about it, but there was a wide sense of like, no, you can't. Young people need to go away and have life experience, get more life experience. Like, okay, what does that mean? So I did lots of different jobs. Like, how about now? And I think for me, I guess I've done growing up in that time, but also explored different sorts of ministry and understanding what that would be. And there was a really wise priest that I had who was supporting me in a church where I was before. And particularly when I was exploring around licensed lay ministry or priestly ministry, as to what was the difference and how would I work out which one I was to discern, what might that mean? And for him, the question he asked me then was around sacraments, around Eucharist in particular, of would my ministry feel complete if I would it make any difference whether or not I could share communion with people? And for me, it was this deep sense of that would be really significant if I couldn't, because actually for me, that encounter through the Eucharist is really significant. And in the conversations that developed around that, it helped me understand, for me, a call to that deeply sacramental part of ministry, which is perhaps a more distinctly priestly ministry than licensed lay ministry, which for me were the two that at that time I was exploring which might it be, because teaching and developing and working with like small groups and faith development is really important to me too. So if it wasn't immediately obvious, but that I guess that distinctly sacramental part for me was the bit that helped me understand actually that for me my calling was priestly ministry, and at that point I wasn't sure whether it would be in a full-time capacity or whether I would be doing it alongside what I was previously doing in secular work, which I guess initially I'd thought that meant I had to do licensed lay ministry, and it was realizing actually it wasn't about how many hours you could commit to it, that was about what your calling was, but quite often those all get a bit mixed up. It's a bit messy. So I guess for me, that understanding of that sacramental kind of role of holding that sacred space for people, and being that representative of God, I suppose, in a very particular way, is there in priestly ministry. In a way, though, I think when I went to BAP, the thing that came back, then there's always at least one negative, and I think the negative in mine was we're not quite sure she really understands what priestly ministry is. And I think probably in my challenge trying to articulate it, in some ways that's still there, because my sense is that all of us are called by God, and all of us take part in that in some way anyway, and sometimes I think we try very artificially to put boundaries around it all, in a way that I think can be harmful as well as helpful.
Absolutely. I loved what you said about sort of holding the sacred space for others.
Yeah.
I love that image. And one of the other images that I love is the image right behind you.
Oh, yeah.
It looks fantastic. Yeah, just noticed
Actually, the
it.
light's a bit, let me just pull this curtain shut.
Absolutely
Might
gorgeous.
see a bit easier. So that's a painting I've done relatively recently, but that's also been a vocational one. Of there's a statue at Chester Cathedral of the woman at the well. I think it's called the Water of
Ah,
Life. So
right.
this is my painting of a statue, and I can't remember who it's by, of the Water of Life at Chester Cathedral. And for me, that's the woman at the well holding the water for Jesus, and the kind of intimacy of that. But for me, I painted it here with both the rainbow and with ripples. And for me, both of them are important. Of the, I guess, rainbow has become a sign of inclusion in all sorts of ways, which is really significant for me. But the ripples for me is that encounter with God, and the ripples from it. And I think for me, sometimes I imagine what it would be like for that woman who probably has no idea that her encounter with Jesus has had ripples for so long.
Yes.
And in my sense in ministry is we're called to encounter Jesus and to share that encounter, and we never quite know what the ripples might be. So that for me, the ripples were part of trying to capture something of that, really, that joy of that encounter, but none of us quite know what the ripples might be from it. Yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Thank you for that. And so simple, but yet so profound. Yeah, thanks for that. And I guess I wish I could just sit here and stare at that image all day long. But I know we're both dizzy and we have to move on. But really, this kind of leads on quite nicely to my second question, which is, from your experience, what have been some of the joys and challenges of priesthood ministry?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I brought down a couple of things that I thought might help. Well, you can tell even from the painting, I tend to process things creatively and in color.
Yes.
It's quite it's often where I do my thinking. I think for some people, art is an expression of already formed theology. For me, often my theology develops through the creative process. So this is a weaving I did as when I was kind of part of my exploring vocation stuff, really, was this. So this weaving was me trying to this is a picture of my life, and different threads and different colors represented different things at the time. And I was praying with it and I was trying to get it really, really neat. And as I was praying, I felt this really strong call to the back, to all the messy bits. And for me, I actually have it on my wall that way around now. And my sense is my call is to finding God in the mess, in the frayed ends, in the bits that we try to hide.
Yes.
And what's happened over time with me during my ministry is a really deep sense of that call to the mess, to living in the reality of life, not just the neat picture that we want to present on Facebook and Instagram. Love it, but they're full of the really nice, neat bits. Don't show this bit. I think this was probably 8 or 9 years ago I made this. So actually probably 9, because I was ordained 8 years ago and it was before ordination. This has sustained me through quite a lot. I had a really unexpected curacy. So all of us have challenges in life. In my 3rd year of curacy, I was signed off work with depression and anxiety. And what we didn't know at that point, and I went on antidepressants because they could help potentially, we didn't know at that point that I would be one of the small number of people that have an atypical reaction to medication. And so antidepressants can trigger mania in some people, and I'm one of those people it triggers mania in. But I also, my atypical reaction of mania is also atypical. So although I went to the doctor to go, something's gone wrong, they weren't able to work out what it was. So for me, I was then in mania for 10 days in my 3rd year of curacy, and it played out in the diocesan office in all sorts of interesting ways. And within that, though, I went Googling to try and understand what was going on and stumbled across ADHD and what that looks like in women. And my GP did refer me for ADHD assessment. Day 10 of mania for me played out at curate's training, not the best thing to do. And by the end of which I went to hospital, a bishop took me to hospital, and I was then sectioned and came off the medication on different medication because of how long I've been in mania. By then it had triggered psychosis as well, but I had huge depth of spiritual encounter within that, but the highs and lows and the challenges of it. Yes. And then when I came out of hospital, I also had my ADHD assessment and I was confirmed as having ADHD. But because of how I'd reacted to medication, I was also diagnosed with bipolar, and they picked up autistic traits. And I've since had that assessment. I've also been diagnosed autistic. So that was quite an eventful third year of curacy, and not what was on the tin. When they give you your book of what's meant to happen in curacy, this was not the list.
This is what happened in the space of
a few weeks, like a couple of
Oh.
months. So I had to obviously then send an email to bishops and to HR explaining I've now been diagnosed with these things. So for me, we then had to have, there were some quite difficult conversations, because it turns out that apparently if you've, those diagnoses could potentially have been red flags during selection, so for at least some further exploration to see if it was possible. And so they weren't at all sure whether I'd have been selected for ordained ministry if they had known those things about me. So there were longer conversations, and that was a really tough year of having to try and get well again from all that had happened, but also not being sure whether it would be possible to continue, whether I would ever be signed off curacy. Obviously, you know, that's I have been, because this is now in a different bit of the story, and I'm priest now in Pennington. Yes. But I think through it, I kept coming back to this, actually, the sense of call, and actually God was in all that happened. And for me, the gift, there's been so many gifts from it. One of it has been I've lived deeply the stigma that there is still around mental health, particularly around the bigger labels and psychosis. And I've been the other side of that and people's reactions to that. And that's really hard. I've had people wanting to pray for demons to be released, telling me that there'll be me without all these things in eternal life, and just really unhelpful things that are like, what? And I think I've become more prominent about challenging that and opening that up. So for me, there's part of my call is to live out of the messy ends of both my life, but to bring that reality, to make it safe for other people to talk about the reality of their life as well, and to finding God within it. God isn't just in it if you're healed and become better. And sometimes we simplify things in a way that we sort of put people as not quite okay, not quite within God, or you're just there to be the recipient of care. Yes. And we've all had the kind of head on one side and the soft voice and the stuff that actually, whilst it's meant well and it's come from a deep intention of care, can actually quite isolate the other person.
Sometimes. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and it makes the other person, you know when you've become the recipient of care and you're no longer really seen as a contributing person yourself.
Yes.
I'm not sure there's anything in the scriptures about that happening. So I guess for me, my sense of priestly ministry has become, well, I did laugh with the bishop when we actually finally got to the sign-off bit of curacy. I said, you did tell me at the beginning that curacy was meant to be formational, and mine was definitely formational, just not perhaps in the ways that were intended. I don't know. I think God works through all of it, really.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Rachel, thank you so much. I loved what you said about sort of noticing God in the daily messes of our life, the mess.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think sometimes, as Christians, we tend to try and gloss over things, and and I really do struggle with that. So thank you so much for bringing that.
No, for me, it feels, I guess probably because of my own story, but for me, I think it's all of us have that. And sometimes accidentally churches can become, I sometimes feel a bit like churches were there before Facebook, but they've sometimes have that same bit of you can only present your shiny lives.
Yes, that's right.
I don't think anyone ever intends it to be that, but sometimes there can be that sense of you've got to put on your smile and then I'm fine. And I don't know, God's with us wherever we are. We're human beings with all the mess that involves for all of us.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, gosh. Wow. Yes. Thank you so much for that. Real final question then. And it's a question that I always love asking people. Yeah. Do you have any words of advice, wisdom, encouragement for individuals who are exploring a vocation to ordained ministry or any ministry, really?
I think my word of advice, I'm not very good at short, but probably would be, sometimes we end up putting a big capital V on vocation and making it really big, and is it this or not? And it kind of becomes a bit the be all and end all.
Yes.
And I guess I would encourage everyone to perhaps keep it with a little v, to see that our vocation plays out in all of who we are and where we are and the things that we're encountering. And yes, some of that might have a particular distinctive thing like priestly ministry or licensed lay ministry, and some of it might not. And there isn't one that's better than another. And I think sometimes we can get quite precious in how we talk about priestly ministry in a way that I think can make it unsafe around that discernment journey for people to, because it is quite a vulnerability to put yourself into it. And I think for me, it's wanting to go, you're wonderful and you're loved by God, regardless of whether the church notices that, and regardless of whether the church says yes to you being a particular something.
Yes.
And to make sure you've got friends and support around you that might be Christian friends, but it might just be somebody from down the pub who actually can help hold you through that, because I think sometimes the discernment process can be bruising for people, and people can feel judged in a way that I think is unhelpful and can be quite damaging for people. And I think, I guess, if anything, my journey shows even really weird stuff can happen, and somehow God's works through that. It turns out being sectioned in security is not an end to ministry, but it might have been a different direction for it, and it still might be. I don't know.
Yeah, and this may be sound a bit controversial, but I don't like the language of selection.
Yeah.
Because again, I know people who have had, you know, they've received the words, we don't think, you know, you're right, or you've not been selected, and they kind of feel like, oof, I'm not good enough, or do you know what I mean? And just yes, I don't like the language of selection. But anyways, that's a conversation for a whole nother time.
No, but I agree with you, because I think it is, for me, I think discernment language is more helpful around discerning, and for me, all of it. So in fact, this week I've been at an interview process for another role, which I have been invited to do, and I decided to approach that and to people there were as well as a discernment thing on both sides of discerning, who am I, who are they, is this God's call for what might be next? And it was okay. In fact, to me, I was really shocked when the bishop phoned to offer me the role, because it's like, I don't know, and I felt at peace whichever way it's going to be. So yes,
absolutely.
I guess actually I'm going to show one other thing related. This is a sculpture that I did a while back.
Lovely.
It's willow, and it was for me about life. So when I was younger, I used to think we'd have problems and we'd sort them out, and as we went on in life, there'd be different problems. And this is my spiral of always the invitation to choose life. And it was really significant to me through discernment stuff, of actually being willing to risk that vulnerability. For me, so my journey is the bit around the edge, but it's always connected to bits that have gone before.
Yes.
Like no part of our journey is in isolation. It's got ripples behind us and ahead of us. And for me, the stick through the middle was Jesus. And so that always my life is trying to connect to him. But the bit for me in terms of making it a spiral was that sometimes we end up revisiting similar things that we've been in the past. And that's okay. Yes. That's part of our calling. We're not called to suddenly jump onto someone else's spiral and become someone different. Yeah. We're always called to become more fully ourselves. So there's a mirror at the bottom, so when you look through it, albeit broken, you always see echoes of Jesus through it. When we look back through our lives, that we can often see Jesus at work in them. So I guess that's my encouragement in discernment, that it's Jesus is at work in it, even if things go a bit differently to how we think they might.
And I love that, because actually that shows us that life is, you know, nothing is linear.
Yeah.
Our journey is not linear. It's
not
messy, it's chaos, but it's also beautiful. There's a beautiful mess, beautiful
yes
and all of that.
Yeah,
I love that. Thank you so much, Rachel. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I'm sure that for those that are watching this, that they will be encouraged by this as well. So thank you, Rachel.
Well, thank you for opening up the conversations, because I think there's such a richness in different people's stories, and it helps see it's not all one shape. Absolutely. I'm not very good fitting a shape, fitting a box.
Wonderful. If you're watching this, or will be watching this, and if you've got any questions about the series that I'm developing, feel free to get in touch with me, and I'll be delighted to have a conversation with you. And so until next time, bye.